This is what he says. Be ready to give up everything rather than to be separated from God. It would be better to displease the whole human race rather than displease God. Only sin ought to be feared, and only sin ought to make us sad. All earthly things come to an end. The world is a play which is over in a short time. You come in one side, you go out the other. In a few moments of time, an eternal treasure is contained. Whatever pleases God is good. Choose what you will desire to have done when you are on your deathbed. Okay. Live as though you were alone with God on earth. Only God makes man happy. There is no other good but God, and no other evil but sin. Nothing may be done merely for our own gratification. He who more zealously mortifies himself in this life shall enjoy the next more fully. His desires are always fulfilled who desires nothing but what God wills. The will of God soothes all bitterness. When we are sick, we know by what spirit we are led. He lacks nothing who desires no earthly thing. Do not put off the good which you propose to do, unless you want to fall back in the way of perfection. To be troubled by the admission of faults is a sign of pride and not of humility. What we are before God is what we really are. Those who love God want love more than knowledge. He who seeks sanctity must repel from his heart whatever is not God. He does not belong completely to God who desires something for himself which is outside of God. Tribulation, poverty, and humility were the friends of Jesus. Let them also be our friends. No mental anguish, even if for a good end, comes from God. The humble man considers himself to be unworthy of honor and worthy of contempt. He who thinks about hell, which he has merited for himself, will bear any pain with patience. Forget yourself, and you will be mindful of God. Love to be held in contempt, and you will find God. He who is content with a lesser good is not far from evil. He who is desirous of glory is held low in esteem by God. The saints always speak of God with love, of themselves with humility, and of their neighbor with kindness. The curious man lives in a perpetual wandering of the mind. Woe to him who loves his health more than his sanctity. The devil is the hunter of the lazy. The vain priest is a plaything for the devil. He who wants peace of mind must master all of his desires. And the servant of God has little to say, is diligent at labor, and unbeaten in sadness. So it's good to review those from time to time. There's a lot of wisdom in there. So we will continue with what we were speaking about last year, and that is the spirit of poverty. So, let's see. Yes, okay. So it's necessary to have, as Garrigou says, everyone must have the spirit of the evangelical counsels in order to be saved. You don't have to have the vow of the evangelical counsels in order to be saved. The evangelical counsels are poverty, chastity, and obedience. So you have to have the spirit of poverty, the spirit of chastity, and the spirit of obedience. Without these, you can't be saved. All right. So that's what we're talking about here, because you don't take vows of poverty. A strict vow of poverty means you can own nothing, not even the clothes on your back. Some congregations have mitigations of that. Sometimes you can have a little bank account or something like that. But the strict poverty vow is nothing. Everything goes to the community. Somebody gives you something, you just hand it in. See, but you don't take a vow like that. But you have to have the spirit of poverty. That means detachment from, no excessive attachment to material things. So you have to be somewhat attached to material things because you use them, obviously. But you can have an excessive attachment to material things, which is against the spirit of poverty. St. John Chrysostom said, "You have seen Lazarus in the vestibule of the rich. Now see him today in the bosom of Abraham." That's from the gospel, the parable. "You saw him as the dogs licked his wounds. See him now surrounded by angels. You have seen him in great poverty. See him now filled with good things. You saw him languishing for hunger. Now see him placed among delights. You have seen him in combat. Now see him wearing a crown of a victor. You saw him working. Now see him rewarded. Because Lazarus was very despised and very poor on earth, now he is very rich and very honored in heaven." That's the parable of Lazarus and the rich man. St. Augustine said, "Lazarus purchased beatitude by begging, and the rich man purchased punishment by possessing." That means excessive attachment. Obviously, it's not wrong to possess things, but excessive attachment, that's what we're concerned about. Psalm 111, verse 5, "Acceptable is the man that showeth mercy and lendeth. He shall order his words with judgment, because he shall not be moved forever." And the same psalm, "He hath distributed and hath given to the poor. His justice remaineth forever and ever. His horn shall be exalted in glory." And the rich must follow this way in order to assure happiness, eternal happiness. They will be happy only through the poor. St. Augustine said, "Console yourselves, you who are poor, you who beg and live by means of charity. Console yourselves. Your tribulation shall be turned to joy, and your sorrow shall be turned into rejoicing." Now, this is if they accept their poverty in a good spirit. Because you could be the most impoverished person in the world and yet the most attached person in the world. If you envy people for what they have and resent people that who do have some money and do live comfortably, that you are far worse than anybody else, because you don't have the spirit of poverty. As the spirit of poverty is detachment from the things of this world. So he continues, St. Augustine, "Do not regard your poverty as a curse, and never murmur against God. For the Lord is just and merciful in all his works. He made the poor in order that, by bearing indigence for a short time, they can acquire eternal life. He made the rich in order to distribute abundant gifts and to obtain by their means the pardon of their sins. For this reason, be patient and wait for the Savior." So God makes the rich in order to alleviate the sufferings of the poor. He makes the intelligent in order to instruct the ignorant. He makes the strong in order to help the weak. Because everybody has a role. And so your poverty or your weakness or your lack of intelligence has a role, and that is to exercise the virtues of those who have money, have intelligence, or have strength. It's all part of the providence of God. So those who are deprived of, say, certain things like that should be humble. And those who have those things should also be humble and should also use them for the glory of God in ways that are called upon by circumstances and providence. So God makes people for a certain purpose, and you should try to find that purpose and fulfill it. So it's not wrong to be rich, but it's wrong to be excessively attached to your riches, and it would be wrong to hoard them in such a way that you never do anything worthwhile with them, such as to give to the church, to build the house of God, you might say, and or to alleviate the sufferings of the poor. And you see that in the history of the church. I mean, rich people that it was Saint Elizabeth of Hungary, I think, gave away everything. Saint Charles Borromeo told his family they were super rich. He said, "I'm going to give it all away." He was the one to receive all of the riches of the family. So I'm giving it all away, and he did. So you can visit his family's palace, you might say, in Stresa in Italy. It's an island which has the Isole Borromei, and that's the Borromean Islands, and there's a magnificent home there and gardens and everything. I mean, they were extremely rich people. It's near Milan. And so he became the Cardinal Archbishop of Milan. So there's many cases of that, of people giving away a great deal or some of their money for the poor or for the church or for whatever else. So don't forget, there were in former times, there were a lot of poor people. In modern times, since the Industrial Revolution and communications, etc., it's much easier to make money now than it was, say, even 100 years ago or 200 years ago or 300 years ago. There were a lot of poor people. You had an aristocracy that was generally well off, and then you had people who were farmers and had very simple situations, and from one generation to the next, you'd be poor or rich. See, that was the way it was. Now, even ordinary people, especially in a country like this where you have a lot of entrepreneurial ability, where you can make your own business and do whatever you want, ordinary people manage to rise up to have at least some goods of this world. So it's a little different. You see, is most of the people that, at least that are in poverty, most in this country anyway, are in poverty through their own fault, because most of them, in most cases, again, I'm making generalities, could support themselves and at least live decently. It's generally true. But countries are different, and sometimes the economic or social atmosphere is not the same, and the resources in the country are not the same. The leadership is not the same. The government is not the same. So each place is different, but there should always be sensitivity to the needs of the poor, if truly they are poor. And you see, the state has taken over most of the alleviation of the poor in Western countries, you might say. It used to be the church took care of it, and that was much better because the pastor of the church would have a poor box, and people would put money in the poor box. And he knew the condition of each family. He didn't, he knew it just personally, and he wouldn't blab about it. He wouldn't go around, saying this one's this, this one's that. I mean, he would just keep it to himself, but he would pass on money to people that he knew needed it, say like a widow with children. See, so that it was much more personal, and also it was much more controlled. There's no ability to deceive anybody about money, and if somebody was just not working and lazy, he wouldn't give any money to him. He'd tell him, go do some work, or do some work around the church, I'll pay you. See, it was a much more personal thing. And that's the way say, before the 19th century, alleviation of the poor was handled. It was handled by the church. But now, the welfare takes care of all of those things. And that's not a very good system, but that's the way it is. So everyone, in order to enter heaven, must have the spirit of poverty. Now, St. Thomas points out that material goods can be enjoyed only by one person. So you can't both have the same banana. You see, a material thing, by its very nature, is able to be enjoyed only by one person. If you eat the banana, somebody else cannot eat the banana. You see, and that's the nature of a material thing, and that's why people fight over material things. They fight over territory. There's only one king that can have this territory or that territory. Whereas spiritual things or even intellectual things can be enjoyed by many. So you think of a concert hall and they're playing some, say, classical music. Everyone enjoys it the same way, or at least hears it the same way. Some have a greater appreciation of it than others, but everyone hears it the same way. Because it's an immaterial thing. It can be enjoyed by all at the same time. But a material thing can only be enjoyed by one person at a time. And that's why it's the source of contention and worry and anxiety. Spiritual goods can be possessed, this is St. Thomas, by many at the same time, but not so material goods. Hence, possession of material goods gives rise to conflict, strife, and wars. Look at the war in Ukraine. It's 3.5 years now. Over some provinces, people dying, people your age dying. Who knows what the outcome will be? All right. On the contrary, spiritual goods such as virtue and truth can be possessed simultaneously by many. St. Thomas says that the right of ownership is the right to acquire and administer material goods. In regard to their use, however, they must be readily given to those who are in need. St. Paul says, "Charge the rich of this world not to be high-minded, nor trust in the uncertainty of riches, but in the living God, who giveth us abundantly all things to enjoy. To do good, to be rich in good works, to give easily, to communicate to others, to lay up in store for themselves a good foundation against the time to come, that they may lay hold on the true life." That's from 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17 to 19. The spirit of poverty leads us to a strong desire for the goods of heaven and a reliance on the help of God to reach the end of that journey. So if we turn away from material things, we are going to, by the grace of God, automatically be more interested in eternal things. St. Augustine said, "The love of worldly possessions is a sort of bird lime," that means bird dirt, "which entangles the soul and prevents it from flying to God." He also said, "He who loves worldly objects, he who fixes his affections upon the goods of this life, is earthly minded and consequently cannot be animated by divine love, for God detests a divided heart." So poverty is to be detached from earthly possessions. Those who have the spirit of poverty fix their hearts upon God as their only treasure and value earthly goods only inasmuch as they enable him to serve God with greater ease and perfection. So, yes, we're surrounded by material things. Obviously, we possess them, we use them, but they should only be cherished, so to speak, to the extent that they pertain to our relationship with God, that we may use them for his glory. That's the spirit of poverty. So anything superfluous should be avoided, and not particularly for a priest. It's disedifying to see a priest who's very worldly, who's a flashy dresser, and has a really flashy car, and it's very dissatisfying. I mean, you're a creature of the next world when you're a priest. You are like an angel, like the Archangel Gabriel, in the sense that you belong to another world when you're a priest. It's just like if somebody is seriously overweight, say a priest weighs 300, 400 pounds, and the first Sunday of Lent, he's talking about fasting and how it's necessary to do penance in order to go to heaven. There's something there that doesn't fit. Well, maybe that's not a good example, but so the same thing would be true if you were very worldly in your activity, your possessions, and so forth. So you should be conscious of that, and to be detached, to just have what you need, and not be looking for other things. St. Paul said, "This, therefore," this is from 1 Corinthians, "I say, brethren, the time is short. It remaineth that they also who have wives be as if they had none, and they that weep, though they wept not, and they that rejoice as if they rejoiced not, and they that buy as though they possessed not, and they that use this world as if they used it not, for the fashion of this world passeth away." So that refers to the shortness of human life. In other words, that all of these things are really meaningless in the long term. Okay, we'll stop there.